righty. Welcome to Detroit in Black and White. It's Friday night in the Motor City here in Detroit. We've got Jim Nardone, former police chief from Trenton. Welcome, Jim.
Happy Friday.
And then we've got Joanne King of the podcast Detroit Joe.
Hi, everybody.
Over on the east side there, representing.
Yes.
Welcome, Joe.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks. So before we get into anything really serious, we're going to talk just a few minutes about the Detroit Tigers. And I find it's a little bit, I don't want to be over dramatic because I've sort of drifted to sports more and more. I think as the world gets crazier and crazier, I see it as sort of a nice distraction and just another form of entertainment, as if you're streaming Netflix or whatever. But the Tigers are on a skid once again, and probably at the wrong time. I mean, baseball is a game where sometimes you get hot and sometimes you turn cold, but you have to have more hot than cold. And lately they've been a lot more cold than hot. They're losing tonight against the Atlanta Braves, 6-1. They're playing here at Comerica Park. They're only 3.5 games ahead of Cleveland. I mean, at one point during the year, they were probably, I think, 12 or 15 games ahead of Cleveland. Cleveland is on a tear. They've won probably 12 or 11 out of 12 games or something. And the Tigers are just skidding. I think they've lost 4 in a row, maybe. And so, Jim, I know you're a Tigers fan. What do you make of all this? Do we just kind of pull back emotionally and say, all right, they're cooked, or do you still have faith?
I have faith, but I think what we need to do is we do need to relax. I mean, they've been here before. They've been really streaky this year. They peel off 6 wins in a row, and then they lose 8, or they win 8 and lose. They have, that's kind of their trend that from what I see this year. And they're going to have to turn the corner if they're going to be in the playoffs no matter what. Is that correct? Even if they come in second place,
right?
They'll be a whatever wild card or
right.
I'm not even sure how the process works anymore. They have like a single game playoff or however they do.
Well, they'll have. I think it's the best. It's the best out of 3 for the wild card, and it looks like. I mean, the 2 top teams, I think, in the division, in the American League, don't play the wild card, and then the 3rd team in first place does play a wild card. And it looks like at best the Tigers are going to end up, well, it's not clear yet, but if they start to win, maybe they'll be able to be the top 2 in the league or whatever. But right now, I wouldn't be. I mean, like I say, Cleveland's on a tear, and they have to play Cleveland 3 more times in Cleveland.
Good.
In Cleveland, and then they have to play the Boston Red Sox, who are doing pretty well, and they're in the race as well in the other division with the Yankees and Toronto, and they have an incentive to win. And right now, the hitting is just really streaky. There's, like I say, there's 1 run they've scored so far tonight, and Atlanta, and the problem is they made a conscious decision at trading deadline that they've got a great farm club. They've got a lot of talent waiting to come up, and they didn't want to trade for that to get anyone great. So they got, maybe of all the trades during the deadline, they got one good guy, Finnegan, from the Washington Nationals, who's a good reliever, but he's injured. He's supposed to come back soon. But the other guys, I think Charlie Morton, 41 years old, from the Baltimore Orioles, just came during the trade deadline. I think he gave up a lot of the runs this evening. He can't be relied on. We have another guy, Patting, whatever, from Minnesota. He pitched a good game the other day, but it's looking shaky. I mean, the thing is, even if they make it to the playoffs, the way they're playing now, they're going to be eliminated immediately.
Doesn't look good. Let's say hi to our friends. Hey, Edward. Good evening, Detroit. Janet Overall. Hi, Janet. Kenneth Reed, our old friend. Kenneth Reed, who came to visit us at least once. The Tigers will probably get the wild card based, and I don't think he has a real rosy outlook for the Tigers going forward. Joe Cool, good evening to you.
Yeah. So, yeah, thanks. So I think whatever. And then we have, I think it only puts more pressure on the Lions because now people say, all right, screw the Tigers. We got the Detroit Lions and trust us to have a
Too
big.
early to give up. Hello, Karen, and my old friend Jan from Victory Gym.
We're going to the Lions play Monday night against the Baltimore Ravens, which they're a great team. The Lions have a great team. We'll see if the Lions can be up for that game. I like the idea that the Lions are underdogs in that. I think they do best when they're underdogs.
That's a tough. That's a big hill to climb there in Baltimore. So
Yeah,
they have to. They don't even have to win that game. They have to play well.
they have to be competitive. I
Right.
agree, but they should. Obviously, they can win it, but they're going
I
to.
agree. I agree. They can win.
Play a great game. They're going to have to play great. If they have a mediocre game, they're going to lose. So let's get to. I was curious. We talked about it a little bit last time about the mayoral debate. I guess October 15th, WXYZ is going to be hosting it. And so, Joe, what can we expect, and how big of a deal is it? There may only be one debate. How big of a deal is it, and who has to win, and what's?
Well, I hate to say this because it makes me feel like that I'm a sore loser, which I am. But we know that Sheffield got it. I mean, she had so many votes. The only way that the pastor's going to, do it is if he really speaks well, which he does. But I think that Sheffield has it. I don't particularly care for, but it is what it is. They shouldn't have waited quite so long to run. There are too damn many of them running, and she got it. That's all I can say.
Yeah, Jim, what are you? First of all, are you going to watch the debate, and what do you think has to happen?
I will watch the debate. Here's my question: what is the format going to be like? Is this going to be an open debate, or is it going to be one person answers questions, then they move on to the next person? I don't know. I think the interaction is important in a debate, and if there is no interaction, I expect this to be a controlled environment, and that would be bad for the underdog, I would suggest.
Yeah. Well, I think the idea that they're calling it debate, I think there has to be some form of debate. I think whether they control it and say, okay, somebody is asked a question, and then they go to the next person and say, what do you say? And if there's somebody says, well, I think Mary Sheffield's blah, blah, blah. Mary, do you care to respond to that? Hopefully there's some give and take there, and there's
it's
a
got
little
to be.
Yeah, I mean, or it's not a debate. I mean, it's funny, earlier during the primary, they kept trying to emphasize these little gatherings or whatever. They're saying it's not a debate, it's a forum, and we're not here to debate. And, I guess when you have, whatever, 8, 9 people on the debate stage, it's hard to really just have a free-for-all. But
It is.
2 people, they should go at it. I look at it like, Joe, you're right. Look, Mary had 51%, somewhere around there, 51% of the vote. Kinloch had 17%. Santil had 16%. She got edged out there. And so I mean, the argument for Kinloch is that he's saying, well, that was the primary, not a lot of people voted. We're going to see a lot more. He thinks there's going to be a bigger piece of the pie to grab. I think that it's a pretty steep hill to climb. I think he's going to have to get in there and be aggressive and kind of show the differences there. And I think he's going to have to be on the attack. And whether he's up for that or not, if it's a break even, if Mary breaks even, she wins. He's got to do more than break even. He's got to win.
I thought that Jenkins and Kinloch, that those two would join forces, but you know how politics is.
What do you make of the endorsement? I mean, those two were really kind of going at it, Mary and Santil, during the primary. They were giving it to each other, and now Santil has come around and endorsed her. It makes me wonder: is Santil going to run for Congress? Is Santil maybe going to take an appointment with her cabinet or whatever? we don't know. I mean, look, RFK reached out to both parties when he decided to drop out of the race, and the Democrats ignored him, and Trump embraced him, and Trump took him in and said, "Yeah, I'll give you something if you endorse me, and I'll take some of your people with me." And so we don't know. It'd be curious, and it'd be nice to get Santil on here to.
It honestly would be, because I would like to ask her what happened. She needed to be stronger. But just what happened that would make her go with Sheffield?
It's interesting. I interviewed people at the polling station over on Warren, not far from I-75, in off of Woodward, and I didn't get the sense that people were rah 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 about Mary, but they were telling me they were voting for Mary. It was sort of like some were last minute. One woman still hadn't decided. She said, she was standing there with literature in her hand, waiting to go in. I interviewed her before she voted, and she just said, "Well, I don't know." She goes, "I'm leaning toward Mary. I haven't made up my mind yet." That's minutes before she votes. So I think there's going to be people out there like that, but I don't know that Kinloch is going to be the alternative. And so she may be the obvious choice. Like I say, 51% is substantial. It's not, when there's just two candidates, then, there's a possibility of Kinloch, but there's also a possibility that Mary's going to even get a bigger one. My prediction is that it's probably going to be, this is just a total guess, Mary's going to win 65 to 35%, but I could be totally off.
I had a nice talk with Kinloch, because that was I only met him once, and that we had a real nice talk. And I hope that he realizes, being a minister in this city, he can work it so that he will always have influence. He don't have to be a mayor. Being a pastor of many churches, he's a decent guy. He'll have the influence. Why does somebody have to be mayor? And he told me he wanted to make changes. And if another person talks about affordable housing, which is bullshit, there is no affordable housing.
Well,
it changes from moment to moment.
I think we mistake affordable housing with like cheap housing, and affordable housing is just we're talking about in the city of Detroit. Maybe affordable housing for like a one bedroom apartment might be $900, $1,200.
That's what it is.
$1,400. It's not. There are apartments now on the riverfront where the Joe Louis is. I think some are going for like $4,000. That certainly would not be affordable housing, but for people who are really low income, it's not affordable housing.
But it's not affordable housing just isn't for low income. People are going to have to realize that the day of low income housing and Section 8, whatever they call it, those days are over. Those days are over. No one's going to put a roof over your head.
Well, Jim, do you have anything, or are you ready to move on to I know you wanted to talk about some issue.
First, I want to say hello and get a couple of comments. Good evening to you, Sam. Karen said she hopes that Solomon Kinloch puts on his climbing gear and talks about climbing higher mountains, a great spiritual song. Kenneth Reed says Mary Sheffield's to lose. She'd have to fall flat on her face for Kinloch to have a glimmer. Remember the absentee votes. Santil will not necessarily be a boost for Sheffield. Karen Winston, I think that's spot on. And Kenneth went to a Kinloch event, and he said not much to it, kind of low energy, and that's a feel for the whole campaign right now. I didn't really see much high energy from any of the candidates.
Right. I'd agree. I mean, it's just I'm not feeling it, and it's coming. It's around the corner. I mean, what's today? Today's September 19th. The election is on November 5th, I believe. Whatever the Tuesday is, the first Tuesday, and it's it's not moving. I mean, it's not. I remember when Anthony Adams was running against Duggan. Duggan just locked him out and said, "I'm not debating you." Duggan won. I think he probably got 80% of the vote because I saw one billboard up by Anthony Adams. It was right on Woodward in Midtown, and there may have been others that I didn't see, but whatever it was, he was not making a splash here. And I feel the same sort of energy, the same sort of vibe here is that I'm not feeling a lot. And I mean, it's interesting. One of our, it was Kenneth Reed who said, I also went to the Kinloch event rally yesterday at Eastlake Church, and there wasn't much energy in the crowd. That tells me a lot. And I've talked to people at the church who not everybody, he doesn't have the automatic vote of some of the church people. I mean, some who I think would prefer that he remain their pastor. And so, but some are just, they're not totally, not everyone. I'm sure he's got some very loyal people there. And it's not being disloyal by saying I'm not going to vote for him for mayor, but you may prefer him as a pastor as opposed to your mayor. So we'll see how they go.
Can we take a break before we get into the outrages?
Yes, let's take a break.
Hi, I'm Eric Sabri, your Wayne County Treasurer. Are you living in the home of a deceased family member and you're facing property tax foreclosure, or maybe you know someone who's in the same situation? The probate process may be helpful to you. If you file a probate petition and notify our office, the foreclosure proceedings will be halted during the probate process. We have several nonprofit partners who have free attorneys who can assist you. Contact our office, 313-224-5990, or email us at taxinfo@waynecounty.com. Don't lose your family property. Some of these properties have been in the family for 4 or 5 generations. Contact us now. We're here to help.
Okay, we are back. It's a Friday night in Detroit. It is September the 19th. We're approaching the fall, and we've got the Tigers, we've got the Lions. We're going to start the Red Wings and the Pistons, but let's talk about something more substantial. Let's go to the outrage of the week. Jim, do you want to jump in on that?
I do. I want to start with, you brought up RFK a little earlier. I want to talk about the Vaccine Advisory Committee.
Sure.
So talk about a cluster. It's absolute chaos. Mm-hmm. So the discussion is whether to stop recommending combination vaccine for children under 4 against measles, mumps, rubella, and chickenpox, hepatitis V vaccine. So here's my position, right? Mm-hmm. We can argue about the government's involvement in everything or nothing, but the government needs to protect these young kids. There is still mandatory vaccines to get into schools, to get into most schools. I needed to look that up today because if you watch CNN, Fox, NBC, there's some confusion. People are really confused. Should they get vaccines for their kids or should they not? And I think the government's, it's an outrage that the government is walking away from its citizens. We're going to move right into the COVID vaccine. Did people forget that bodies were in frozen truck trailers outside of hospitals in Detroit? Did people remember the day that it was announced that these vaccines were being brought to the market? I remember that day. I remember reading about it and hearing about it and saying, finally, this is a relief we've all been asking for. And now just a few years later, we forget about the damage that this disease did and what the vaccine did to get us back on our feet and out on the streets. This is ridiculous.
The thing that bothers me is that when RFK Jr. is talking, he's not even basing it on science. It's basically gut beliefs. Look, you have, people got mad at Dr. Fauci and saying, oh, we keep changing the things, 6 feet distance and this and that. they were using what they knew at the time. They were trying to do the best to protect the American people, whether it was in the end prudent to shut down everything or whatever. They did what they thought was the right thing at the time based on what science they had. They have more science now, and the majority of doctors are saying that we should be getting these vaccines. I mean, the danger of not getting the vaccines is these diseases that took us so long, including polio and the measles and all those other things. It took so long to bring them under control that they weren't a pandemic, are now, we're putting ourselves at risk by, sending kids. And I mean, there's no better place for incubation of viruses than schools, where kids are on top of each other all day.
That's right.
You
And
know,
that's
Remember
where
the
it's going.
tragedies in Italy and some of those countries in Europe, all those people dying.
I think it is so crazy. What is his backstory? I mean, he is a lawyer. Everybody knew that the Kennedy family cared about children. Remember,
Right.
like, they had that huge foundation. Why is he so anti-vaccine?
So that's his mother, right?
His
Is it
aunt.
Aunt
That would be
Ethel Kennedy.
no,
Is it Ethel?
no, man. Ethel is his mother, but it's the Kennedy family that
Sure.
had started the big foundation. This man sounds like he's off.
well, I think, you have his cousin, for what Carolyn Kennedy, who has not been very flattering about, speaking of him. And look, I mean, the guy has an interesting background. I mean, he was a heroin addict, which,
Yeah,
people have addictions and they recover, and it doesn't disqualify them. But the problem is, we normally have a doctor ahead of in these positions that he's
always.
in. And he's just a guy who has theories. I mean, look, nobody's going to say if he wants to take the dyes out of food and stuff like that. I mean, in Europe, a lot of dyes in food have been banned for years. We
Mhm.
should have a ban on that. So there's a few things we can agree with, but the other stuff that he's talking about is just his gut belief that I don't believe in that. It's like, we have doctors who are far more qualified than him who are saying, yes, we should do that. And I'm probably too believing. Like, if they tell me you need 6 COVID shots this year, I would be in line at the
I
CVS
would too.
getting it. But I mean,
But did we forget? I mean, now they're saying, well, you don't really need a COVID shot unless you're 65 or above. We lost a lot of people that weren't 65 years of age.
Yeah. And Allan, you and I are old enough to remember when there was polio,
Right.
and those kids had those rods, and that we always knew who that they were. They had those strange crutches,
Right.
and a lot of people died from polio.
Mhm.
And being a teacher, I can remember when the chicken pox came through our sixth grade.
Mhm.
And the health department came to us and said, you are allowing them to come back much too early. The whole sixth grade had it,
Right.
and
I mean, being a teacher where kids contract, I mean, it's so quick. The virus is spread so quickly. We've seen where not even pre-pandemic COVID, we've seen where schools have been shut down sometimes, where they say, hey, the measles, the flu, whatever is going through, stay home, And so I just, it's scary to have a guy like that who's, you can be anti-vax. I don't have a problem with that. But if you're making policy, and the policy is not based on science, but rather your belief that this is not good, you can always find detractors. He can find doctors who say, I don't believe in the vaccination. I have a good friend of mine. He's married, and I'm friends with his wife. She's a doctor, and she's a good doctor, but she didn't believe in the COVID. She doesn't like vaccines, and they have a young child and whatever. But as Jim says, I mean, we covered that from, Deadline Detroit we were suddenly, everyone was locked in their home. I mean, we were working like sometimes 15, 18 hours a day covering the COVID thing. Our traffic went crazy and people were reading everything that we were putting out. And before you know it, there were refrigeration trucks, not only at hospitals, but at funeral homes. They couldn't bury people quick enough.
There was that many of them.
Yeah.
Did we forget? I mean, this isn't going to be the last pandemic we ever have. And we need to educate people and make them. I understand we want people to make their own decisions. We're talking about adults. I started this segment talking about kids. If you're not responsible enough for your kids, then the government needs to step in. That's just my position. It might be a unique position, but if you have a 4 or 5 year old kid, they're not immunized. They go into a classroom, Joe, and what happens?
Everybody has it, plus the teacher. And some kids will not make it because they don't have doctors. They have to go to clinics. And they have to spend the whole day lined up there at the clinic. I had students that hated to have to go to the clinic.
When we've forgotten what happened 4 years ago.
Joe, where were you teaching?
Throughout, I was most of my time at Miller, and before then at McMichael.
And those were elementary or junior high?
Well, one was a middle school. They called it a middle school.
Sure.
And Miller was what they actually called a junior high school because we had the 9th. But then they took the 9th grade out of a lot of schools, and we were the only ones left. But I can tell you that one day I had my first earache, and I was in my 40s, and I had never had one before. I called up doctors until I got one that said, okay, I'll call you in some meds. Mm-hmm. It was at midnight. Luckily, I found a pharmacist that could, fill it. I thought I was going to die.
Right.
And so I saw my doctor later on, and he told me, you have the kitty earache. I said, what? He said, someone in your class has an infection. Ask and find out. I went back to school. I said, who in here has an earache? 3 hands went up.
Oh, wow.
And I want to say, well, what the fuck you doing here? Like it doesn't bother children as much as it can hurt us.
And Karen's still being careful about COVID. She's keeping her circle small. Go ahead, Allan. I was going to cover a couple.
No, go. It's I find it interesting, even particularly even during the height of it, where some people would be like sniveling and coughing and sneezing, and I'd be like, what's going on there? And they go, I don't know. And I say, well, have you tested for COVID? No, I haven't. I say, why not? They say, well, I don't know. And it's like, it's not just for you. I've had, it drives me crazy. You go to a party and someone gives you a hug or shakes your hand. And I say, hey, how's it going? They go, oh my God, I got a terrible cold. I'm like, well, maybe you should have told me before you hugged me. I think people aren't always very considerate about it. And, in my apartment building in the very beginning, I was like sort of the mask police. There were young people walking around and they would be so offended. And I'd go up to them and I'd say, hey, can you do me a favor? Can I ask a favor? And they go, yeah, sure. And I'd say, you do me a favor? Could you wear a mask in the public areas here? And they go, and they'd huff off and they'd be so like mad at me. And one woman, and this is the beginning where we don't know, what the mask, but we were being advised for that. And I was in the elevator and a woman's about to walk on without a mask. I said, you can wait for the next elevator.
Yeah.
And she was like,
a lot of young people didn't believe that they could get it. They thought that with them being, young, I'm just 25, I'll just have a cold and it's over until their friends started to die.
Well, you
and
know
their
what?
grandparents died.
There were a lot of, in the very beginning, there were a lot of Black people who did not believe,
Oh,
you
there
know,
were churches where it went through that the church. I know this one church where that the whole choir got it because of the way that Black folks worship.
Right.
Well,
Togetherness, right?
it's easy to get it.
Thank you, Edward.
but I remember, I do remember in the beginning, a lot of Black people were saying, well, you know, because of the pigmentation of our skin, I think we're going to be protected. And then
No,
people started dying, including, you know, Benny Napoleon, who was a friend to many of us. And I remember Benny's brother got it and almost died.
he almost died.
Yeah,
Yes, he did.
he almost died. And then, you know, then Benny, you know, had it, and he
I
went
can't
to
believe he's
he
gone.
went to Ford Hospital, and you know, I thought, and then suddenly, you know, his daughter got mad at me because we were writing about it, you know, and Benny was a friend, and we were writing about it that Benny was there, and then they said they had switched him on to a ventilator, and I wrote and said, you know, I added, and I said, well, normally not a good sign of progress
It
in the
was
right direction. And she got mad and said, it's just because they want him, he's having a hard time breathing, so they want to give him a little help. And I'm like, well, that's not a good sign.
It's not when they would.
Yeah,
The
when
vent
you
was
start,
the last step.
yeah, when you start getting put on a ventilator, that's
That's the
normal.
last
Some
step.
people make it out, but you know, a lot of people don't, and it's, you know, so it's a scary kind of thing. Let's take another break, and we're going to come right back. And Jim, we'll get back to some of the stuff you want to talk about.
Okay.
Nearly 30,000 vacant lots all over the city of Detroit are for sale right now. That's right, nearly 30,000 vacant lots are available now, starting at just $100. The lot next to your house or the lot down the street. Make it yours today in just a few simple clicks. Find out if it is available by visiting buildingdetroit.org. At the Detroit Land Bank Authority, side lots are just $100 and neighborhood lots sell for $250. You can apply and pay online today by visiting buildingdetroit.org. And if you don't see the lot you're looking for, call our offices. Our phone number is 313-974-6869. Again, that is 313-974-6869.
All right, we have returned here. It's Friday night in Detroit. I assume the Tigers are still losing. I haven't checked the score recently, but they were losing 6-1 in the 7th inning. Not a good sign. Anyways, Jim Nardone.
Yeah, can I cover a couple points real quick, and then we'll move on?
Sure.
Edward A. Allan, he believes that not having the opportunity to get a vaccine is horrible. Absolutely right, Edward. I agree with you. And Kenneth remembers the stress that he endured with his wife being a nurse and with some of his family members, as we all did. Some of us did.
Mhm.
MZ Suzuki, Belle Isle has a memorial displaying all the people that passed from COVID. And
That was spooky.
MZ caught chickenpox from one of the students as a young educator in the 20s, and they're in his 20s. MZ, tell us. MZ Suzuki, I'm sorry. I won't.
And I just want to say for Kenneth Reed, for your wife to work in the COVID unit, very admirable. I mean, what a risky thing. I had my college roommate was working in hospitals in Colorado. He was part of a doctor's group that serviced hospitals, and he never got COVID, but I mean, he got all the shots and he wore the mask and all this stuff, but he treated a lot of COVID patients, and it's a scary thing when we see all the people who died of COVID, and there's a huge number, including in the city of Detroit. So,
thank you. You know, like my music, that's exactly what we were talking about. You know, it's really the government, but you know, it's for the greater good.
Yeah.
okay.
I remember
Yeah,
there
go
was
ahead.
a coach that got it in the city it shook us up.
Hello,
You know?
Jill. Janet Kennedy fired the board members. I'm not sure what the heck's going on. I guess that's the vaccine advisory committee that we're talking
Mm.
about.
And Marcia Gilmore, who says she worked in a nursing home where so many people got sick and passed away. We did
Yes,
see
they did.
saw a lot of elderly people, and again, anybody who's servicing, working in a nursing home, a hospital facility, or even as a caregiver, and had to deal with that. It's scary. I mean, we feel like we've brought it somewhat under control. I'll ask all three. I had COVID once. I went to This was 2022, I believe. I went to a wedding of a reporter, got married in Ferndale. It was a Saturday night, and there were about 115 people there. Ended up being a super spreader where somewhere between 25 and 30 people. The groom called me to tell me that him and his bride had gotten COVID,
Right.
and that a lot of others. And the wedding was on Saturday. He called me like on a Tuesday morning, and by Tuesday night I had COVID, and that was fortunately the only time. But I've had all my shots all the time. Have you two had COVID?
I never had it. I was, I guess, the fact that I stayed in. One of my former students who was on the police force called me as soon as they told us to stay in, and she sent a message to me, and she said, "Stay in your house." And I said, "I'm not trying to die, honey," and I stayed in.
It's interesting. I got it. I tested positive in 2024 for the first time last fall.
Oh, really? Okay.
I did. Yep. It was around winter time of 2020, less than a year ago for the first time.
And had you traveled? Because I see a lot of people who travel end up coming back, particularly from overseas. They end up, but I see people who get off planes where
I hadn't done it. My guess was the Lions game.
Oh, really?
I don't know, but that was 4 years into it. So
getting it, Jim, did it feel like a normal cold, or was it worse than a normal cold?
Mine was more in my throat. I wasn't coughing. It was more like strep throat kind of a infection. So
I had. Go ahead.
I took a test and it was positive. But go ahead, Allan. I want to get to Marlon here in a second too.
When I had it, it was somewhat. I had friends. I had a friend who had it very early on, and he said it felt like somebody was sitting on his chest. He had a hard time breathing. I think the early cases were more severe, but there were also people who died. 1, 2 years, 2, 3 years later. Mine was like a bad head cold, and I was tired. I slept a lot. It was probably about 5 days before I was starting to really feel better. It wasn't horrible. It wasn't it was somewhere between a cold and a little bit of the flu or something, but it wasn't horrible. But it's scary because sometimes people have the lingering effects of, sometimes people lose their taste. Sometimes they have, there's other physical ailments that it can impact organs and stuff like that. For the most people, it depends on your body and your immune system and all that kind of stuff. So
I'm going to go to Marlon. He said something earlier about the vaccine and thought that it was more harm than good. And he asked about autism. And my position is this, Marlon. I respect exactly what you're saying there. But, through history, these vaccines, we talk about polio, we talk about the flu, the pandemic, 1918, how many people died? 1.2 million died in the United States, allegedly. Stats are stats. You can do what you want with the stats, but a heck of a lot of people died from the pandemic. And I think back, our colleague, Teresa, and I, she worked for the city of Trenton. I was a retiree. They got the Johnson & Johnson shot. And I remember the attitudes and the happiness and the relief of the people that came. I volunteered to get their shot, right? We had people out there getting, actually Teresa organized it all, but it was a different time, a different attitude, but I remember how happy people were and how thrilled they were to walk in there and get that shot. They felt better.
You don't like my music says COVID is here to stay, and I think there's no question it's part of our, it's on the menu now, along with flu. And I'll give a little advice. I'm not advocating whether people. I am going to get my flu shot. I have a good friend who's a nurse who always says that you should wait till sometime in October, possibly late October, because the efficacy of it declines every month. And if you get it too soon, it declines too soon. So by February, March, it's not as effective. So that's up to you. But
I got mine Monday.
You did.
And I didn't have to pay because I am a senior citizen.
Right.
So my husband and I went, got it, and I need I got the flu shot. Mm-hmm. And last year I got the flu and the COVID shot at the same time. Mm-hmm. But this time that my doctor told me to split them up. So in a couple of weeks, I will get the COVID, and I will be staying in more. I will be wearing a mask because I don't want to leave here with that.
Right. And Edward talks about the truth being told in society and recognized. And Edward, that's one of the biggest challenges today. People are programmed, and it's unfortunate. We grow up with parents and siblings, and so many of us, and I was there at one time, we fall into this pattern and believe what our parents believe. And today, it's not 1955 anymore. People don't seek the truth. They seek an easy solution to a problem. And we need to find the real solutions. And that leads me into my next point, if I can go there.
Go for it.
Are you ready? I don't want to.
We are. Hey. We're not going to fire you like Jimmy Kimmel.
We should talk about that too.
I'm going to call this a borderline brilliant because I don't want anybody's head to get too big tonight. Opinion piece in Deadline Detroit, September 17th. Allan Lengel. J.D. Vance came to Michigan to sell Detroit snake oil to heal its crime problem. And I want to quote you have to go to Deadline Detroit and read it because we argue, we talk, we have discussion. But I think what people fail to realize, and Edward, I'll hit on this, we all want the same thing, right? We want safe streets. We want healthy people. We want jobs. We want people to be able to afford a house, right?
Right. Absolutely.
Give DC, give Detroit, give Chicago more FBI, DEA, and ATF agents to work task force to weed out the small number of serial killers, shooters, and robbers who account for the lion's share of crime in these communities. Let me back up for a minute. Allan's talking about the National Guard, and I loved it. We have discussions and disagreements, and we like it's all in good faith, right? We all live our truth, and it's a brilliant piece. I think everybody should read it. I think the police should read it. I think the bad guys should. I think everybody should read this editorial that Allan wrote because what he said is the truth, and I appreciate that, Allan. Thank you.
I appreciate that from you. I do have a question. You've been in law enforcement. I mean, my experience, and I've covered law enforcement for many, many decades, and I know there's people out there that's basically their profession or living or whatever you want to call it, that they're robbers, they're carjackers, they're whatever. And it seems to me that my experience has been that it's I mean, Detroit gets painted in this broad brush, and J.D. Vance goes in howl and makes it sound like Detroit's the most scary, dangerous city. And there's some criminals in the city, but the lion's share of people are good people just making a living, sending their kids to school, going to Belle Isle, whatever. And it's a group out there that they make their living committing crime. Is that, I mean, you being in law enforcement for, how many years total were you in law enforcement?
Just under 28.
28 years, which is
just under
long enough. long enough to. And what was your impression of crime and who was committing it and how that was?
Well, I think our biggest challenge today, I don't know if it was a big challenge when I started out, is career criminals. And this is unfortunate. This doesn't make me happy to say this, right? We have, and I think you said it brilliantly, there's a small number of killers, shooters, robbers who account for the lion's shares of crimes. Well, the issue is people shouldn't be afraid to go out of their house when they live in the city of Detroit. They shouldn't be afraid to walk their dog at 10 o'clock at night. Those are the things we need to address.
Right.
It's a small number of people, but I think society wants to give people second and third and fourth chances. And what happens is you end up with the stabber in Detroit at the house party that killed 2 or 3 people 5 weeks after he got out of prison. You end up with a girl reading her cell phone and a guy reaching over and stabbing her 4 times, and she bleeds out on a train in Charlotte. We all want the same thing. We want this to be done. We don't want people like that on our streets. We just haven't figured out a way to get those 14 or 17,000 murders off the street without looking at society as a whole. I think we look at society as a whole instead of separating the people that we need to separate.
I also do think that, I mean, I think law enforcement obviously plays a very important part of it, and some's reactive. We would like to do some preventative stuff, but as we see that there are so many issues also contributing to crime. One, that people aren't getting proper guidance, even in school, I think. And Joe, maybe you can address this. I think sometimes the schools are remiss in not identifying children who are problematic or having problems at home or whatever. And they grow up, like I say, Adolph and I went to school together, and we knew people in junior high who were going to end up being in Jackson prison, and they did end up there. And, if we can easily identify them, then why, and not to say that you can change somebody anyways, but you should try. And
well, the problem is,
yeah,
and this is how the school systems go, and I used to hate it. If they don't want to put them out of school,
mm-hmm.
It's like a black eye if you put them out. So they get what is known as 0 days. In other words, they go home, and if their parents can bring them back, then they will bring them back. You have to hope that a child there in the school does what we call it a class C offense,
Mm-hmm.
because then that the police have them. But if it's an A or B offense, then they have to stay, or they go home for 3 days.
Mm-hmm.
We are caught up in this thing of giving children not just a second chance, but letting them do shit over and over and over. They didn't want us to fail children.
That's exactly the point. Starts in school, right?
Come at me all of the time and say, "You gave out 20 Fs. Are you really failing them?"
Mm-hmm.
I said, "Well, I'm hoping that will shake them up."
I was in DC when I was in DC at the Washington Post. I was covering the Guardian Angels, which we remember,
I remember
started in New York, and they started patrolling streets in DC, and they went to one of the high schools. I believe it was Anacostia High School, and it was a 9th grade class, all the 9th graders in a auditorium, and these guys from the Guardian Angels were giving their spiel on what good we're doing, and at the end they said, "Is there anyone interested?" I mean, there were, I don't know, there must have been 200, 300 kids, and like one kid raised their hand, and so I was doing a story, so I followed the Guardian Angels, who then talked to the woman who was the supervisor of all the 9th graders. And she said, "Look, some of the kids are intimidated. They don't want to raise their hands in front of some of the kids." She said, "Some of the kids are like 17 years old." And I looked at her, I said, 17 years old and they're in ninth grade. And she said, yeah, what can we say? That's, and I thought there's a failed school system. First of all, if you have 17-year-olds in ninth grade, something is wrong. And they should, first of all, they shouldn't be with the younger kids, that they're obviously the king of they're bullies. And I don't know, the system just fails in so many ways. The red flags are everywhere. And
Well, we can pick out a dropout during 4th grade, 6th grade, and 9th grade. And what we did at Miller, if they were in the 9th and it didn't look like they were going to be moving on and they were older, we would send them to the high school. So they would be away from the younger children.
Yeah.
But it has gotten to the point that teachers could only say certain things to them.
Mhm.
We had to use happy tones. Well, I ain't no happy tone sister.
Yeah.
Either you're going to do right or you're going to get out. I am not going to follow some of these strange rules. And I was in the principal's office. Well, Miss King, you should not have said that. We allow for this. And a lot of our children are in foster care. They're in homes. Their parents are locked up. I used to teach at a correctional place to help pay off my student loans. That was my nighttime job. I taught their children during the daytime, and then I taught the parents there at night. We got things really messed up. We don't know how to help, and it takes money, and that the government really doesn't want to give us money to help them. They don't even want to feed them.
It's interesting. When I was in Washington, the Washington Post had a program where we were helping high schools with their school paper, and another reporter and I would go out to the Blue High School, which was off of MLK Boulevard. And first of all, some days, some of the gang members would block the kids from getting on the road into school. The principal had to jump in a squad car and go out there with the police to clear the street so students could attend. We had that year 8 children from that school were murdered. Not in the school, but they attended that school. They were murdered. And so how do you, I don't know how you have I really, to the credit, I mean, they did have, every school in DC had metal detectors, which I think every school in the country should have, regardless of whether it's Oxford or Detroit or Birmingham or whatever. I think every kid should have to pass through a metal detector. But it's a hard place to live. I loved going there because we work with students on the school newspaper, and I hopefully inspired them to want to write. And it was great.
And you probably did.
And I also brought, I also bribed them. I brought, pizza or chicken wings or ice cream.
Yeah, you got to go through that.
Yeah,
but you know
they
what?
Appreciated it. So
Detroit kids are not that bad.
What years did you teach?
And I know that sounds strange, but I was never afraid. I would go into the King homes to drop off, children. I knew some of their parents because I met them when they were in lockup. I really think that our children here, that they are okay to even be better. Now, the problem are the people that are on the outside influencing them.
I agree.
They don't even go to school.
Right, absolutely.
But I was, even to this day, I'm just very proud of my kids.
And what years did you teach, John?
I had 34.3 years in, and I retired in 2013.
Oh, wow.
Did not know I was going to retire. I went to work, came, and there was a message on the computer, and it said buyout. And I was already losing money because it kept cutting our salaries. But I didn't feel it in my heart to, retire then.
Right.
But I, came out because my mother, she was, dying. And I said, it is time, Joe. Come on out.
Allan, do you want to cover some of those comments, or do you want me to do it? Or
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead, Jim.
Dorian Denard talking about, I think he's talking about defunding schools in 1970. The Busing Act was enacted. You could have graduated high school in Detroit with a trade certificate. Before that, they instituted zero policy, expelling students. And I think you're commenting that's racism. That's all it was. We spend more dollars on prison and schools. I think Ross Perot identified that when he ran for president in 1992. He talked about that, Huntsville prison. Coming up with various patchwork solutions for mass inequality is endless. You're exactly right. It's more than crime. It's poverty. It's crime as a result. People don't wake up and want to commit a crime. It's a result of everything else that they've had to live with. And I'm not making excuses,
but it's true. You are right. You're right.
Yeah.
It's poverty more than it is crime. If you ask me, I know Allan and I talked about this. If you eliminated poverty and inequality, there's going to be a heck of a lot less crime in this country. I believe that.
Yep.
Good evening to Mary Kemet. Let's call the thing. It's about racism and has been about racism to feed the prison industrial complex. Thank you for your comment. Charter schools are the Trojan horse. You don't like my music. Sad affair. Edward is commenting on you don't like my music. He's correct. It isn't ideologies. It is funding right now. I still think it probably is funding. You don't like my music. Derrick Henry. The Guardian Angels have a reputation for being racist vigilantes. They were a problem there when they started in the 70s.
Yeah.
And now he never goes away. Curtis Lee was now running for mayor of
yeah, I thought that was him.
Yeah, as a Republican. He's running on as a Republican.
I thought that was him. I wasn't sure.
Yeah. He's been there forever. I mean, he's been part of the thing. I mean, the concept is not in DC. They were walking, the streets and the subways and all that, and I think they were generally welcomed for their presence. I mean, they don't carry weapons. They're some strong guys, but I don't know if it's a good. I mean, they were generally welcomed, and I think the police didn't seem to resist that, but. I don't know if it's a good idea or not, but it's a form of citizen patrols. I don't know if citizen patrols, how they work in the different neighborhoods these days. I don't really hear much about citizen patrols, but I don't know. Is there anything happening in your neighborhood, Joe?
Mm-mm.
Yeah.
We have. I'm in an interesting area.
Thank you, James.
But we don't have any crime. Do I hear the gunshots? Yeah. When I first moved here, I would hear guns and I would drop down to the floor. Now I hear them and I keep walking.
Yeah.
Well, crime is not the root cause of crime. I think that's the answer. That's the bottom line. And Kenneth Reed talks about the National Guard, and that was the point of the opinion piece by Allan Lengel in Deadline Detroit.
Well, let me ask you all this. Did you hear that a lot of FBI men and the women that they have quit?
There's probably some some have been fired for not being loyal. The higher level people were given a examination or were questioned whether they voted for Trump, whether they were loyal to him. I'm assuming some have quit. And we've seen, with federal prosecutors, under Pam Bondi in the U.S. Attorney's Office, the Attorney General's office, I'm assuming some people have left and some have been fired because they're not loyal enough and I think to me, the loyalty is to the law and the Constitution. It's, there's really no room. I mean, when we talk about justice being blind, we know that it's not always the case, that there is some bias, there's human beings behind, but generally, we hope that the law is applied equally. Not always the case as well. And particularly if you have money, you can get a great lawyer and the outcome can be a lot better.
It looks that way.
I want to thank Edward for his contribution to this imperfect country as a United States Marine. Thank you, Edward.
Yeah. So I think we have reached, by the way, the Tigers lost 10-1 and the Cleveland Guardians are winning 2-0 against, which means if Cleveland wins today, there'll be only 2.5 games out. It looks almost inevitable the Tigers are going to drop out of first, but we'll see. But anyways, I want to thank Joe. Thank you so much for joining us. And Jim, as always, thanks so much. Vanessa is on vacation. Adolph is out of town. And so hopefully at some point we'll all have our full complement again. But so tomorrow we'll be back at 10 a.m. and we'll be talking about more things, and we're welcome to talk about other things.
And thank you for
I feel strongly about that.
I appreciate it.
Thanks for coming, and thanks to all our friends out
there. And the podcast is called Detroit Joe, and she does a lot. I've been on the podcast, I've listened to it. She does a great podcast and a very professional one. She's got great equipment. She does editing. So we encourage you to go to Detroit Joe, to the webpage, and check it out. So thanks again for joining. It's a Friday evening. I want everybody to have a great weekend, and we'll see those of us who want to join us tomorrow at 10 a.m. So have a good evening.
Okay. Thank you, and bye-bye.